Since the start of 2024, we set about planning a road trip to visit some of the remaining asylums across Ireland. In July, we set off on a 1,000-mile journey to visit 18 asylums. Some are derelict, some converted, and some are still in use today. Whilst we didn't get inside every asylum, we still managed to visit them all, and here's how we did it. Here he is.
How's it going? Perfect, it worked out perfectly. Walk out the door and there he is waiting.
Your own taxi service.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it makes up for the late flight. It's 20 to 12, near enough.
Although we've only got 10 minutes in this drop-off area, and based on this queue, I don't know if we're going to get through.
I don't make no money.
Plot twist, we did make it out in time, and the next morning we headed to Momore Abbey, a partially in use hospital for people with learning difficulties. It's due to fully close this year, following allegations of abuse. So this is Abbey Road. Don't expect there to be a white crossing with people walking across, but we've got the main Momore Abbey site here on the right, and then on the left are some of the abandoned bits. See a couple of houses there. We always knew that this wouldn't be the most impressive place of the trip, but it was a nice, easy one and something a little bit different. Momore Abbey opened in 1949 and could accommodate 1,000 patients at its peak. The hospital is currently finding new accommodation for patients ahead of the whole site closing. We're in. It's quite easy.
Yeah, we've made it. I remember seeing this corridor thing in the pictures.
Yeah.
So far it seems fairly plain.
We managed to find the morgue on our visit, but unfortunately the slab had been smashed up. Afterwards, we drove to our first asylum of the trip, Holywell Hospital. The 400-acre site opened in 1899 as the Antrim County Lunatic Asylum and is still used for a range of services today. The building design focuses on two central corridors connecting the wards, kitchens, recreation hall and other services to the wards, which are built on the southern side to maximise the amount of sunlight that patients got. If any of the active hospitals in this video were open to the public, then we took a look inside, and it turns out that this one had a nice restaurant in the old hall. Next up, we briefly stopped at St Conal's Hospital, which opened in 1866, and even had people working on the hospital farms until 1995. After a drive through the pretty landscape of Northern Ireland, we arrived at the former Momore District Lunatic Asylum, which opened in 1853. This one features a common design for some of the Irish asylums, with everything contained in a relatively small area. But despite the architects being ordered to design something not devoid of architectural character, this design has been criticised for exactly that. Day 2 of our trip now, and we started at St Davnet's Hospital, one which has been in use since 1869. Like all of the other asylums, there's two chapels on site, one for Catholics and one for Protestants. After this, we stopped at Ardee to check out St Brigid's Hospital. Scottish architect Henry Thomas Wright won a competition to design it and produce this unique symmetrical design. Construction was completed in 1933, making it one of the last asylums to be built. After a short traffic jam, we then looked at St Lomond's Hospital, which opened in 1855 and closed in 2013. Whilst we weren't able to go inside, we did have a chat with a friendly security guard who wants to protect the building from being smashed up by local kids.
So I do actually have a little story to tell, and believe it or not, I found out recently that I have a personal connection to the asylums in Ireland, which may or may not have come as a surprise to some of you. But it turns out, as a kid, over the last few years, my dad, he'd tell me that at one point, him and my granddad went to visit my great-granddad in Ireland when they were on holiday. So my granddad's Irish, he came to London when he was 14, but his family remained in Ireland. And his dad was in a mental hospital, and my dad says he remembers visiting it in the 1980s briefly. But what I found out recently when I spoke to my granddad was that this was actually one of what opened as the county asylums. It was Mullingar County Asylum, or District Asylum, whichever it be called, which is St Lomond's Hospital. And that was one of the places that we try to check out today. Turns out my great-granddad, he was in there from the early 1960s, and he was still there, in the 80s and probably until we died. So probably, I don't know, maybe sort of around the turn of millennium or something. So maybe 40 decades, 30 to 40 decades he may have been in St Lomond's Hospital in the institution.
Itching to get stuck into a proper explore, we arrived at our final stop of the day, a different asylum called St Brigid's. This was one of the earliest, with construction of the X-shaped building completed in 1833. Despite being designed to accommodate 150 people, the catchment area it covered was 6,800 square miles, or a population of 1.4 million people. Joined by a local explorer, we set about checking the perimeter for any smashed windows, but found the place sealed up pretty tight. Aside from one area. The majority of asylums were built with service tunnels, a small underground network that carried the piping across the asylum. Unfortunately though, most of these contain asbestos. Mind your head.
Yeah, mind your head.
How was that?
It was good. I'm not an asbestos lover, and there was quite a lot of asbestos in there. But
Hopefully worth it.
I've popped my service tunnel cherry, which I knew was going to happen sooner or later.
As St Brigid's was one of the earliest asylums to be built in Ireland, attitudes to mental health at the time were very different, and there was an emphasis on seclusion and keeping people isolated, which is why there are very few wards here, just small rooms. The most dangerous patients could be locked in a padded cell, a small room with every inch covered in soft padding to stop someone harming themselves. The number of patients gradually declined from the 1980s as health boards were urged to treat more people in the community rather than in institutions. St Brigid's continued until 2013 when it closed its doors after 180 years. The building now stands idle, with an uncertain future.
Cheers, it's nice to get back after a long day, have a nice fresh shower, very thorough shower after what we've just been doing. We met up with another explorer who lives in Ireland now, and we just did St Brigid's, probably one of the sort of more widely known Irish asylums that's in quite reasonable condition, quite a lot of stuff left in it and has been for the last couple of years. Unfortunately, when we turned up, we thought it was going to be easy. It had been quite heavily boarded up, quite freshly, as goes our luck. We have not got the luck of the Irish on this holiday, unfortunately. But we did find a little gap, and I went in there and checked it out, and we actually found access to the service tunnels. And if you are an asylum explorer yourself, or you know much about it, you know that the service tunnels are one of the sort of ways that urban explorers have always used to get around abandoned asylums. Essentially, you're going through a manhole outside the building, go round some tunnels full of asbestos, pretty claustrophobic as well, quite narrow, sort of, a crawl space, and then you find a manhole inside that then opens up into the main building, and people will use them to get around the asylums without getting spotted and stuff.
After our first decent explore, we started day 3 with what we hoped would be another. The Ennis Asylum opened in 1868 and has been derelict since 2002. The site sold at auction in 2018 for €750,000, but little has been done since. Unlike St Brigid's, this asylum was built with a recreation hall, which was a communal area for patients. This was usually built in the centre of the site and next to the kitchens. Part of the entrance was damaged by a fire in 2022, destroying all floors from the basement to the roof in the front section. There were no tunnels here, so getting out was a bit more difficult. Disclaimer, don't try this one at home. So we've just come back out. It's hard work, wasn't it?
Got an injury.
Show us.
See this? That's where a spike nearly went into my arm. It's just like a really bad bruise.
Yeah, it wasn't the easiest climb.
No.
That ladder helped us, but it's still not too fun. Yeah. Then we go to the car, have 5 minutes, fly the drone, and then head off.
I think so.
Our final 2 visits on day 3 were at St Joseph's. And finally, St Finnan's, which as you can see has a similar design to some of the others. Such as Our Lady's Asylum in Cork, which was our first visit on day 4. Opened in 1852, the hospital was in use for 140 years, and today the majority of the site has been converted to housing, but not the eastern end, which were the male wards. Unfortunately, most of the site is pretty trashed, but there are some nice features, such as the bars on this staircase to stop anyone falling or jumping. The recreation hall is a separate building around the back, once connected to the main building by a corridor. An annex to the hospital was added in the 1890s, known as St Kevin's Asylum, which is currently being converted. Next up, it was St Canice's, which opened as the Kilkenny Asylum in 1852 and still provides limited services. Our final stop of the day was St Luke's, which was identical to St Dimtner's, which was our first visit of day 5. Both asylums were opened just 3 years apart. On our penultimate day, we started in Dublin. So, as we got a bit of a quieter day today, we thought we would come and take a look in the centre of Dublin. I've been here once briefly, but I think it's your first time, is it, Liam?
It is my first, yeah. Well, maybe I came here when I was like 5 years old, I can't remember.
First time since he's an adult. So, weather's nice, we're going to have a bit of a walk around, and there's a church not too far away from here, where hopefully you might be able to take a look inside the crypt there. Unfortunately, the church was closed, so we went to explore a brewery instead.
Cheers. Guinness's own power station. That's quite cool. A power station just for the Guinness factory, so it could power. I mean, I'm guessing the factory was massive. You can see it's massive today. And there it is. It's converted into like a distillery now.
The drinking didn't last long, as we had another asylum to check out. St Itas. Isolated along the Portrane coast, at the time this was the largest civilian building project in Ireland, opening in 1901. It was built in a pavilion echelon design, meaning that similar to Holywell, all of the wards and services were linked by corridors. All 1,200 patients would have been housed along the southern side to maximise their exposure to sunlight, with men along the eastern side and women along the west. In the centre, the kitchens, which were designed to provide up to 6,000 meals a day to both staff and patients. In 2010, the Mental Health Commission told the hospital to stop the admission of acute patients on account of the entirely unacceptable and inhumane conditions, and the site gradually closed over the next 4 years. Day 6 of 6, and we had 2 final asylums to visit, but first something a little bit different. We ventured back into Northern Ireland to check out a prison known as Lisnevin Training School, which opened in the 1970s to accommodate up to 40 teenage boys. They were either on remand or had been referred for secure accommodation from elsewhere. The secure school didn't seem to stop reoffending. In fact, in 1997, the reoffending rate was apparently at 100%. Like most prisons, there was a laundry department, workshops, a sports hall, and even a football pitch outside. The site closed in 2003 when the juveniles were moved to a new site. The police service used Lisnevin for training until they vacated the site in 2016. The first of our final two asylums was Downshire Hospital, which opened as the Down Lunatic Asylum in 1869. The site has various uses now, but luckily the recreation hall has been kept and is still used for presentations. Finally, we called at Knockbracken Healthcare Park, which was also known as Purdysburn Hospital, which opened in 1906. The design features a series of villas and individual buildings spread out across the ground, rather than one building connected by corridors.
Cheers, you out there?
So we're in the lounge. This is how we end our trips, isn't it?
It's indeed. Yeah, very well fed, very well watered, could be the word.
Got a whiskey, got a Guinness, got his Indian.
Although that might be stashed in the bag for tonight. You'll see.
It's been a good trip, hasn't it?
It's been very good. We've seen loads. We've seen a good variety of stuff. We've seen probably nearly 20 asylums, and plenty of other hospitals, a prison, a mill. We've seen all sorts of stuff, so yeah, really good.